You are listening to the global network of podcasters dedicated to the pharmacy profession. Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Welcome to Executive Dose, the podcast where pharmaceutical leadership meets unfiltered insight. Hosted by Stephen Beckman, CEO of Ural Pharma. Each episode explores the complex forces shaping today's pharmaceutical industry, from global supply chain stress and regulatory shakeups to innovation in branded and generic drug markets. Join us as we engage C-level leaders and decision makers in candid conversations about navigating disruption, driving growth, and preparing for the next era of pharmaceutical transformation. Curiosity leads, strategy follows. This is the Executive Dose.
Welcome back to the Executive Dose. We have a special opportunity to talk with a pharmacy owner and one of our partners, IPC. Bill Drilling is the pharmacy owner of Drilling Pharmacy, and Kelly Stovall is the VP of Pharmacy Services and Clinical Programs at IPC. This is going to be a dig down into workforce, how every sector of pharmacy is impacted by talent management and workforce. And on this Executive Dose episode, Stephen Beckman, our host, will sit down with Bill and Kelly to unpack how talent shortages are reshaping pharmacy operations. Steve Beckman, how are you?
Hey, Todd, it's a pleasure and welcome, guys. We're so excited to have this conversation today. Every time we get one of these executive doses up and on the air, people are learning a little bit more about pharmacy, about the opportunities and about the challenges. And as Todd said, one of the key topics is really look at workforce and how it's impacting you guys right now. But also we'll dig a little farther, because really what we want to do is, as we end 25 and we start 26, we really want to move 26 in a positive fashion and see what you guys are thinking are the big opportunities or challenges with pharmacy. So, but let's start with that main topic. So, Bill, maybe you can kick us off. As Todd said, we're really looking at how we're managing a pharmacy now from a workforce standpoint, and where are the challenges, where are the opportunities. We hear there's a shortage of pharmacists and we can't find good techs, and the operational costs are making it more difficult to be fully staffed. So maybe from your perspective, what has been the biggest challenges that you faced as this, and maybe some of your initial thoughts on how we can improve it and where that improvement can come from, because maybe it can come from somewhere that we least expect it. And then we'll turn it over to Kelly and we'll let her have a shot at that same question. But Bill, why don't you kick us off?
Well, I think there is a lot of challenges coming up in 26, but I also think we're very fortunate because there's a lot of opportunities. In Iowa, we have a standard of care framework for our Practice Act, so anything that we are trained to do, we can do. And so it's really elevating the practice of pharmacy. The issue is we just can't find enough employees. Right now, we're holding our own, but I could easily use 2 more technicians. I could use pharmacists. And basically, I'm hiring for every position, and it's kind of frustrating because we just don't have the talent or the people around to pursue these new things we could be doing. Right now, we're doing hearing aids, we're doing test and treat, lipid panels, A1Cs, and we're there's just so much more we could do, so much more we could bring to our community. And I keep thinking about a pharmacist. His pharmacy was like the IPC Pharmacy of the Year. And he was talking about how that he always had an extra employee or extra technician on staff for to make sure he was giving people good customer service, the customer service they deserved, but also so that he could do, like if a good opportunity to come up, he'd have the staffing to work on it. And I think about that a lot, how it would be nice if we had something like that. And I guess I have one pharmacy technician that is working on her advanced tech degree. Where she's working on being certified for the Tech Check Tech, and we're really wanting to work with our technicians and develop them and walk them up the ladder, because the more and the better technicians we have, the more the pharmacy will be able to do for the community, the more services we'll be able to provide. But basically, it's just such a shortage of technicians. We just can't hire anybody, and we've tried about everything. But I'm remaining optimistic, and we're keep trying. But it is frustrating, and another frustrating aspect is, the reimbursement that we're getting from these PBMs, and it's frustrating that every year we come so close to getting a legislation or something run through at the federal level, and at the last minute it gets pulled out. But I think if what people really need to do is they need to contact their legislators. And, of course, I'm the independent pharmacist, but they need to support their local independent pharmacies, because we're really here. We're members of the community. This is where we want to be. This is where we're staying, and we're vested in the community. And so that's kind of my initial thoughts. But I think there is a lot of opportunity and a lot of reason to be optimistic in the future too.
Well, Bill, a lot to unpack there. Before we jump to Kelly, a couple things. First of all, I couldn't agree with you more, and that's one of the reasons why URAL has made such a focus on pharmacy, but importantly, independent pharmacy. In fact, that's where I get my prescriptions from my local independent pharmacy, Perry Drug. And I've had a couple health issues the last couple of months, so I've actually spent a lot of time with them, and their commitment to quality care of patient despite having a lot of challenges. So a couple things I heard were important. One is, and I want to make sure I'm clear, when we think about the pharmacy, we really have the pharmacy tech, as you talked about, as well as the pharmacist. So are you finding that the opportunity is you can find pharmacists? That's still not as hard as finding the pharmacy tech, it sounds like. That's more difficult. But are you also seeing that you're getting burnout because you got a pharmacist working 4 extra hours a day than they probably should? Or so the real challenge, it sounds like, for you is more pharmacy tech than pharmacy, but is the pharmacist still a challenge that you're facing too?
The big issue is pharmacy techs right now.
Yeah.
We could use another pharmacist, but we're holding our own as far as we're trying to make sure people don't get burned out. We're holding our own. And the big thing is like, I would love to have a technician as a community health worker. I'd love to have somebody trained to do that, but I just don't have the personnel. And it's the technician shortage is kind of holding us down on what we can innovate in our business and what more services we can provide for the community. But and it's a thing where we would gladly train them, walk them up the ladder to be an advanced tech or however far they wanted to go. But we have our technicians trained to give immunizations and help with the test and treat. Just what we're trying to do, all the things to free up time for pharmacists so we can engage in the more clinical aspects of pharmacy.
Well, I think, that's a really insightful and something that I personally haven't thought about as much is, when we think about pharmacy, we try to think about it holistically, but we always seem to start with a pharmacist. And I think a point that you made that a lot of people might not truly appreciate is the role that the pharm tech plays in delivering that engagement with the patient. But I think equally important is what you talked about in terms of trying to expand your services. And I think that's where independent pharmacy is going to continue to be leaned on a lot, but it's hard to do that and deliver that value if you don't have the resources or team. So is the issue with pharmacy tech, there's not enough people going into it from a basic educational standpoint, or there's not enough resources, or even they're from an operational standpoint, it's hard to fund multiple techs because of how the economics work? What's really driving the challenges behind not being able to add those extra techs or get the quality techs that you're looking for?
Well, and I think a lot of the problem is that the idea of like a certified or trained pharmacy tech has just come about in the last, maybe like 10 years or so. So I think we're still trying to get the pipeline loaded with pharmacy technicians and trying to get the word out that this would be a good career for people. And at one time, the job of a pharmacy tech was just to count the tablets and put the labels on the bottle and run prescriptions through. Well, now it's such a diverse field that people can do that I think we have to get a better word out as to what they can do and what a big impact they can make in a pharmacy, because pharmacy technicians are rapidly becoming kind of the heart of the pharmacy.
Yeah, it kind of parallels for me PAs in the physician's office. 30 or 20 years ago, they could do certain things in certain states, and obviously there's a state by state impact in that regard. But in today's world, they can prescribe a lot more. They have a lot more ability to positively impact the office and the patient. So I think that's a good, interesting observation that we have to give them the platform in which to do that. So let's turn it over to Kelly. Kelly, we're going to give you the exact same question. From your perspective, what do you see as the big challenges or opportunities as it relates to workforce for pharmacy?
Well, first of all, Stephen, thank you for personally supporting independent pharmacy. We love to hear that. It was interesting to listen to Bill's explanation there and some of the struggles that he goes through. And I think that what is important to remember in this topic, in this category, is that it's not just a workforce issue, right? These shortages becomes a patient care issue and an innovation issue, which he mentioned. And on the pharmacy technician side, I think that we have expanded the role of pharmacy technicians in response to a shortage of pharmacists as well. And so it's almost like what came first. And, with the increased demands for pharmacy technician roles in patient care, whether it be as Bill shared some of the things that he is offering program-wise, point of care testing, hearing, as we move into more of a clinical space into the pharmacy model, then it requires different skill sets from this particular staff category. And so one of the challenges is then to find a pharmacy technicians that can grow in those areas. And so I think that really adds to the complexity of this struggle that the industry is seeing. And statistically, we know that we are still seeing more job openings per year now than graduates of pharmacy schools. And so that as that grows, right, or as that continues, that pharmacist shortage will continue. And again, as we increase that clinical space in our pharmacy businesses, then those technicians will have to be more customized for those roles. So there's really several things here that we can look at that are participating in this shortage that we're having right now.
Yeah. So Kelly, let's go back to the pharmacy thing. So the statistics, as you said, show that you have more positions than you have graduates. So I'm assuming that the overall rate of students has declined over the last period of time. So why is that? Is that, perceptually, if you're just an average person, you might think, you always hear how your pharmacists are overworked or maybe they're overworked, underpaid. So what do you think is really driving that? Is it the extra hours? If that's true, is that the pay doesn't commensurate with those hours? It's the frustrating elements, as Bill was alluding to a little bit, in terms of the economics of running a pharmacy now, and it takes them away from that direct patient care, and they're just trying to get prescriptions filled and handling all the you know what it comes with dealing with the the PBMs and insurance credit. What's really the underlying factors to this? And is there things that we can do either as a IPC could do as a partner in this space, or even a manufacturer could think of ways to help create that value? Because I think you made a very important point, which is what we saw at your RAL, and that is, I think I'll get this right. You correct me if I said it wrong. Pharmacists are coming more into the clinical space.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something we saw, and we saw it was very important that the pharmacist is going to do that, and is going to do it even more. So they play that bigger role or complementary role to the traditional physician. And I think if a pharmacist was able to really do that and do that with the way they would like to, then it would be a very rewarding role and position. But what is some of the underlying factors you think, and can they be fixed?
Economics, obviously, as Bill mentioned, PBM reimbursements, pharmacies are struggling with financial economics. And so when profit margins shrink, of course, what you are able to hire and pay changes. And I do think we have seen across the industry a decrease in overall salary, which historically was really a draw to a lot of graduates as well. And I also think we have to discuss perception too.
Yeah.
Perception of the career matters for someone entering college. And I grew up in a very small town, and our community pharmacy was really the hub of healthcare in our area, and that was very attractive to me. I was, I worked in a pharmacy in high school, and that care piece, drove me on. But, now we've seen with this profit margins that have decreased even in independent pharmacy, right? But there's a huge perception in overall industry, whether it be, large retail chains and we've all seen the pharmacist work that has a quota, maybe at a larger retail chain, and some of the working conditions have been negative. And so that perception also changes a direction when you're looking at a group of people entering college. Like, is that something they want to do? And so I think we can't ignore that as well.
I think we've seen it. I mean, look at the thought Rite Aid would not be in existence.
I'd like to, could I jump in just for a moment? Because I would like to say too, that it seems like, I think a lot of this stuff we're transitioning to is I can remember when pharmacies first started doing, flu shots, that people almost thought it was un-American to get a flu shot in a pharmacy. And I think we're at the same point right now with our test and treat and our lipid panels and all the new things that we're trying to innovate. Is that a lot of things is that we've got to educate the community on what we can do, but then that will also enhance the profession when people come in and say, "Hey, I got my pharmacist was able to provide a treatment for my strep throat," or I went to the pharmacy with the cold sore and he was able to prescribe something for me. So I think a lot of it is the educational aspect of what we can do and kind of elevate the profession. But I think your analogy to a pharmacy, physician's assistant, and a pharmacy tech was a very good one. But we've also got to elevate like the stature of a pharmacy technician. That we're just not looking for somebody that wants a job, or we need somebody who wants a career as a pharmacy technician, and somebody who we can work with to elevate to the level where they can do a tech checking prescriptions or giving immunizations. So,
well, look I think everything you said makes a lot of sense to me. I think there's a lot of factors, right? To Kelly's point, we got to think broadly and we have to be willing to talk about it. So what I'm hearing so far is one, compensation or economics is important. Two, Bill, to your point, we need to reshape not only pharmacists, but also the tech in terms of it being seen as a good career. And then the thing I think Kelly pointed out, which I really like, is we got to bring this back to the value proposition of care. and patient care. And I think that's why a lot of independent pharmacists were independent pharmacists. As I said, I get my prescriptions from my independent pharmacy, and I asked this pharmacist the other day, I said, why do you still do this with all the challenges faces? Because at the end of the day, I really care about my community, I care about people, and I care about treating them and helping them well. And I find myself having to do more of that. Now, you can either do that proactively or out of the reality of that environment where the patient needs a pharmacist or where they don't have access to other things. So I think we have to find a way to elevate that. So Kelly, maybe a question back to you is, how can we collectively, I mean, that's really what the spirit of this podcast is about, is how do we as IPC or Ralph Pharma, how do we work with the pharmacy and pharmacist or pharmacy owner to help tackle some of these challenges that you guys rightly put out? Do you have any things that you think that we could put into that visionary box and try to move forward positively in 26 and beyond?
I think that we have to be more, I think, aware of explaining what pharmacists do and pharmacy technicians, and how both can really now be a really important member of the patient care cycle. That as we move forward in community care, public health, community access, is that the position is, we have to explain it in an attractive way, right? And how it really does help people and help these communities, especially on rural access. We have such an issue with rural access and rural healthcare now, and really pharmacists are poised to be able to make such a big impact in that space. But I think we have to change the perception a little bit, and we have to start at an earlier age. Yeah. Perhaps we have campaigns on pharmacists. What do pharmacists do? What does your community pharmacy do? How does it help the whole community? And really some PR on that, if you will, so we can attract at a younger age. And because I do feel like historically we have attracted at that younger age until just recently. I think we could make an impact there collaboratively with that exposure. And I think, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and Todd was smiling and I was smiling for Todd, because I think he's probably the biggest PR advocate for pharmacy out there. So it's almost like we're at a tipping point, right? Because we've seen like a big pharmacy chain like Rite Aid exit this year. I believe there's going to be a requirement to drive a renaissance into independent pharmacy again. But to Bill's point, we also have to be they have to be positioned to take on that responsibility that's kind of being forced on them with some of the changes through either the training, education. And so maybe we're really at a tipping point. Whether it's a national chain or independent pharmacy is important. Because at the end of the day, your guys are the ones that interface with the patients and make sure they get their medication. So we can diagnose and we can treat all we want, but if we don't get that last part right, there's going to be failure in the outcomes that we're searching for everybody. Mm-hmm. As a manufacturer, I want to make sure that my products get to the right patients at the right time and there's not limitations, and that you as pharmacists have the ability to deliver that when that happens. So we all play an important role on that. And, to go back to something Bill said at his opening comments, and this one's a really hard one. This is probably a 5 podcast series, is to talk about how do we change the system a little bit? How do we force positive change either at the state level or at the federal level to ensure that all the pieces of the pie are working together in a way that's equitable and valuable. And Bill, you don't have to answer this question, but I did ask it of my independent pharmacist I go to, who's the owner. And I said, because it's something we faced with a product that we have in a therapeutic area where pharmacists are actually losing money to fill the prescription of this particular drug category. And we have to change this, because he said that 50% of his prescriptions that he's filling in his pharmacy, he's losing money because he's being reimbursed at a rate of $4 to $7, and his average cost per fill, all in terms of operational costs and so forth, is around $12. So if those numbers are true, if we don't fix that, we're going to make it difficult to address any of the things that you guys have brought up today. Hiring more people, hiring the right people, investing in those people to continue to develop so you can project out all those things, Bill, that I can hear in your voice that you're passionate about in that quality care and what Kelly was talking about, whether it be diagnostics or others. So, what is the state of the pharmacy from that standpoint and reimbursement?
We're in a similar position. I would say that we have three buckets. One bucket is we're paid under cost. The other bucket is we're paid less than $1. And then the third bucket, which is rapidly shrinking, is the one where we're adequately reimbursed. And, it's almost an insult when you fill a prescription and your total reimbursement for your time, your bottle, your technician time is like 10 cents. And, but I mean, it's scary, the actual number of prescriptions that we sell under cost, that just on the product side, that not adding in any of my cost of doing business. And and that's why that we really need to get some legislation passed. I mean, there's really no other industry that this would be acceptable. You know what I mean? And I don't know how we ever got in this position that we're accepting these contracts.
Well, I think honestly, but whether you're a manufacturer or pharmacist or a PBM or payer, the system is not working efficiently, and I think that's Bill's where it's happened. And the emphasis and focus has lost, and there's certain people. Look, at the end of the day, we all have to do a better job, but we all have to be fairly profitable in order to continue to deliver the services that you do as pharmacists, or manufacturers have the ability to continue to invest in new drugs. So I think our system has I guess it'd be easy to get a headline to say our system's broken. But what I will say is the system needs to be improved and fixed. We have to take some things through the course of that supply chain, that value chain of bringing product to patient has to improve. And when we do that, we can do it. But even when I sit back and listen to the two of you talk, I mean, there's some things that really stand out. Mm-hmm. Look at, we have to reinvigorate young people to see this as a career. Yep. Pharmacy. We have to re-educate or divide awareness about the importance and role that pharmacy plays, and pharmacists and the whole pharmacy plays to patients and to others, because otherwise we're going to run into bigger problems. We have the biggest drug shortage that we've ever had on the generic side in the industry because the industry is not working as well. If we get to the point where large chains can't operate and independent pharmacists can't stay afloat, then we got a bigger problem. That means our patients are not going to be able to get their drugs, and they're not going to get the care and insight and experience that not only physicians play and nurses and everybody, but equally as important as the pharmacists. And now it's what I'm hearing from you guys is the pharmacy tech. So we've got to find a way to do that. And I think that's a couple important notes that as a manufacturer, I'm going to take home, because we are talking, and Kelly, I really would like, I'm going to have to go back and ask my team why we haven't talked to IPC more directly. So we might have to have a talk about what we can collaborate with you guys on. But the point is that collaboration has to happen, because it's not going to come from any one point. And if we don't collaborate in a way that's going to reinvigorate and compensate, we're going to have bigger challenges. And it's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder. And so that's really what we important to do. So, Bill, if I was to say, what are the three things that we have to do in 2026 from your perspective that can help you be the best that you are as a pharmacy owner, what would those be? Maybe I'll ask it this way. On an earlier podcast, on a different podcast I did with Todd this morning, he asked me what was my New Year's resolution. Yeah. So what's your, maybe not your New Year's resolution, but your New Year's wish? If you had three things that you wanted people to know can make a difference in 26, what would they be?
Well, the first one I think the problem we run into with the PBM legislation is we just don't have the critical mass. and of people that contacting our legislators. I think if we could get a huge public outcry, that would be wonderful. The second thing would be the staffing issues, to get more more staffing in the pharmacies so we can do these more things. And the third thing would be to get all these new clinical, well, not all of them, but to get started with more of these, clinical and innovative ideas going in the pharmacy.
All right. Well, I can't disagree with any one of those. I think the biggest one is to create a bigger, better voice. So I can tell you that Todd, and through all the work he does through his organization, through us, and through every, we'll try to come up with a way to create a bigger voice to make sure that the issues are clearly heard. And I would think that if those issues, as you point out, are clearly heard, the conclusions that some things have to be improved or changed should not be a hard or a big leap of faith. Kelly, I'm going to ask you the same question. From your perspective, as we go into 26, what are the things that you think we could do? If we did, we would be coming back on this podcast a year from now and saying we achieved some success.
I think we can, for 2026, because I'd like to introduce the idea of retention, right? Because not only is it recruiting, but we need to retain our employees as well, so we can innovate, so we can grow. And I think when we look at retention, we can collaborate with programs that, increases leadership in both the pharmacy technician space and the pharmacist space, because that better leadership at the store level is going to decrease burnout, decrease losing staff that are critical to our business. So when we look at a few of those things that can retain and really implement some of those things for career development, professional development, leadership development among our current staff, that will help us retain what we have and then attract others as well. I think it's important to always remember that retention is gaining, right? Retention is great. And I think that's one thing we can certainly focus on for 2026.
So guys, I think, we might have the three. So the first one is we raise our share of voice, as we like to use in a marketing term, for pharmacy. And we have to continue to inspire, whether it's manufacturers, pharmacists, distributors, everybody to jump on the bandwagon a little bit in terms of creating a voice for pharmacy, which I think is important. Second, obviously, to Bill's point, which is the obvious one, but a necessary one, is that we have to continue to be able to recruit. But Kelly, I couldn't agree with you more. When we look at infrastructure and HR issues, the first question should always be, how do we recruit the best people? The second question, if it's not asked and you're not doing it right, is how do we retain those people? Retention is important. So I guess a statistic, and I don't know if Bill has the answer or maybe from his stores, or Kelly, what is actually the average tenure of a tech in your store? They might go somewhere else, but what, to put that in perspective so we can really reinforce this retention issue, what is the current retention of a pharmacy tech? Bill, Kelly?
Well, we've been very fortunate. Most of our technicians have been here with us for 15 plus years. Wow. And one thing to speak about, I agree with Kelly about retention, because if you hire a technician, it's just not like they're ready to go day one. It's a long training process. So retention is a huge issue.
All right, but I'm not letting you off the hook before we go to Kelly real quick, because if you are retaining your techs for on average 15 years, you got some kind of secret sauce. You're doing something right. So Bill, share with everybody what you've done to keep your techs 15 plus years. I mean, I think that there's got to be something that would be worthy to share with somebody. What's your magic?
Well, we really try to make it a family environment, and we try to make the job an enjoyable experience. And we try to treat them like members of the family, and try to make them realize that they're important and their voice is important, and what we want to know their opinions.
Yep. Well, I couldn't agree more. At Ural, we live that motto. We always say that individuals can do great things, but teams can do exceptional things, but you have to work and you have to bring them in. But Kelly, I know I kind of introduced that question to both of you. So from a retention standpoint, what are you seeing maybe on a broader perspective than maybe Bill specific? And are there things right from that obviously you mentioned education and certification and other things, but what are we really facing in terms of maybe the actual numbers that's causing this problem?
Yeah, I don't have those statistics in front of me, but I'm now interested to go dig those up. I think Bill said it so well, and I think that when I was behind the counter, I'm no longer behind the counter, but I was behind the counter. Our technicians were a vital part of the business, and they still are, even becoming more vital. And investing in them with training and development matters a lot. I think everyone wants to know that they're moving. They're not becoming stagnant in their career. And that's always a way that we can ensure that. But I think Bill said it the best. It's really a team. It's a care team. And everyone has a very vital part in that team. And everyone wants to feel that. And so I think that's very important, retaining your staff.
Again, I couldn't agree more. So as we start to wrap things up for the day, I think obviously that share of voice that will address the issue around reimbursement, the value proposition of pharmacy. And I think that's important. I think when we say pharmacy, we usually think pharmacist, and I think we have to make sure everybody truly understands it's a pharmacy tech, pharmacy owner, pharmacist, all working together. And we need to raise the profile of that continuum of care, or that scope of care that pharmacy is bringing. And then in addition to that voice, hopefully we can start addressing some of the things that allow a pharmacy to truly move towards what I think Bill spoke to, is being a truly capable part of the community in terms of healthcare on a broader scale. And then with those things happening, hopefully we can start seeing that acquisition, because it's now seen more as a career again, and putting it in a perspective where the retention is there because the value in which they believe they get in delivering that type of care to patients. So I always like to give everybody a parting shot. And so we'll start with Kelly. Kelly, as we wind down the podcast, is there anything you'd like to tell to the pharmacy community through the PPN here? What you want to say on behalf of pharmacy?
I think as we expand that patient care model, we have to really expand our thinking as well on how we recruit, how we train, how we develop our internal staff as well, to support those needs that we are going to continually see. We're seeing now, but we'll continue to see throughout 2026 and beyond.
Well said. Well said. Bill, anything you'd like to share as we depart here today?
Well, I think it's important to not be afraid to try new things, and to always, push the envelope, and to just remain positive, and that we can do these things, and we will get there.
Well, well said again. And Bill, that's what we try to do. We try to push the envelope, try new things, learn. And it's never a failure if you've learned that something doesn't help, because then you can check that box off and go find something that does. So if either one of you ever identifies something that you think a manufacturer, whether it be a generic company like ours or any manufacturer, can do to help you, please share it with us, because we like to think about it. And in the same time, we wish you guys all continued success. I've been in this industry now on the manufacturing side for 35 years. It's hard to believe it's been that long. I'm probably the farthest component to delivering patient outcome. The two of you are a lot closer to it, but I've always prided myself on trying to make sure that our organizations I work with were a true complement to patient outcome. And I applaud you for what you do. I thank you for continuing to fight the good fight on behalf of patients. And my belief, and I sure believe I'm going to be right, is that the independent pharmacy in particular will continue to play a bigger, an important role, probably a role that they've always played but never really fully appreciated. But the conditions are going to be as such as that the independent pharmacy is going to be put back in that role in full force. And hopefully this time, as we continue to challenge, whether it be changes in our system, whether it's to convince our politicians to continue to advocate, or just the community at large to advocate, hopefully when that happens, then the true light will be shined upon independent pharmacy in a great way. And that should translate to what you guys said, is to retain the best people that are passionate about a career in pharmacy tech or pharmacy, and our patients will be well served for a long time. So with that, I'll turn it back over to my good friend here to wind us down. But on behalf of the Executive Podcast, Executive Dose Podcast, we thank you guys for taking time during this holiday season to be with us.
Thank you for having me.
Special thank you to Kelly Stovall and the Independent Pharmacy Cooperative. You guys are an amazing group, truly cares. Never have to worry about which way the compass points. It's always north with IPC, and it's always about empowering the independent community pharmacy. Bill, this has been an absolute treat for us. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Executive Dose. And to my co-host, Steve Beckman, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. This has been great.
Well, we'll keep it going as long as people find value, and hopefully at the end of the day, you can never go wrong with a good conversation.
Happy New Year from the Executive Dose. Be sure to tune back in on all podcast platforms and subscribe at thepharmacypodcast.com.